I watched my father change the locks on the home I had paid for, his movements methodical and deliberate, like he was performing routine maintenance rather than locking out his own daughter. My mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression cold as marble. "Victoria needs the space for her children," she announced with finality. "You're successful enough to find somewhere else." Behind them, my younger sister Victoria couldn't meet my eyes, her hand protectively cradling her pregnant belly as her 2-year-old clung to her leg. The irony was suffocating. The mortgage statements sitting in my email inbox, the renovations I had funded, the financial stability I had provided for 6 years, while they conveniently forgot who actually kept this roof over their heads. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sound of the new key turning in the lock echoed through the autumn air like a final verdict. My father tested the door once, twice, confirming that his firstborn daughter no longer had access to the family home she had saved from foreclosure. My name is Rebecca Mitchell, and at 32, I never imagined I would be standing on my parents' driveway with 2 hastily packed suitcases, effectively homeless despite having paid the mortgage on this 4-bedroom colonial for the past 6 years. "Rebecca, please try to understand," my mother said, her voice softer now that the deed was done. "Victoria has another baby on the way, and Jason lost his job again. They need stability. You have options. You have your career. My career. The accounting firm partnership I had worked 80-hour weeks to achieve. The career that had allowed me to step in when my father's construction business collapsed during the recession, when the bank was 2 months away from taking the house my parents had lived in for 25 years. The career that now, apparently, disqualified me from the compassion and loyalty I had shown them. I lived in the basement apartment," I said, struggling to keep my voice even. "Victoria and her family could have the main house. There was no need to—" "It's inappropriate," my father interrupted, pocketing the new keys. "A growing family needs privacy, not their aunt living downstairs, coming and going at all hours. Victoria deserves a proper home for her children." Victoria deserves. The phrase I had heard my entire life. Victoria deserves the new clothes because she's still growing. Victoria deserves the tuition help because her grades aren't good enough for scholarships. Victoria deserves the down payment for her wedding because Jason comes from a modest family. And now, Victoria deserves the house I saved, the home I had maintained, because she had made a series of choices that left her financially vulnerable while pregnant with her 3rd child. I looked at my sister, standing slightly behind our parents. At 28, Victoria still carried herself with the hesitant posture of someone perpetually waiting to be rescued. Her first pregnancy had come during her sophomore year of college, a degree she never completed. Jason had moved from job to job, never quite fitting in, never quite meeting expectations, while Victoria worked part-time at a boutique that barely covered childcare costs. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, the reality of my situation finally penetrating the shock. "You can stay with Melissa until you find an apartment," my mother suggested, referring to my best friend from college. "Or get a hotel for a few days. You're a partner at your firm, Rebecca. This isn't a crisis for someone in your position." Except it was. Not financially. I had savings, good credit, and a solid income. But emotionally, I stood on the precipice of homelessness orchestrated by the very people I had sacrificed to protect. "I need to get my things," I said, gesturing toward the house. "My files, my books, We'll pack everything up properly," my father assured me. "You can come by on the weekend when we're done and collect it all. It's better this way." Better for whom? The question burned in my throat, unasked. 6 years of financial support. 6 years of living in the converted basement to give my parents privacy while still being close enough to help when needed. 6 years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who had put her life on partial hold because family mattered more than convenience. "Rebecca," Victoria finally spoke, her voice small. "I'm sorry, it wasn't my idea, I swear. Mom and Dad just thought, with the baby coming." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. The sister I had read bedtime stories to, helped with homework, taught to drive. The sister who had never known true consequence because someone, our parents, me, her husband's family, had always cushioned her falls. In that moment, I didn't hate her. I pitied her. Because Victoria had never developed the muscle of self-reliance, and at 28, with her third child on the way, she likely never would. "It's fine," I said, though it was anything but fine. "I'll figure it out. I always do." I turned toward my car, loading the suitcases into the trunk. My mother stepped forward as if to hug me, then hesitated when she saw my rigid posture. "We're not throwing you out, sweetheart," she said, attempting to reframe what was happening. "We're just rearranging priorities temporarily. You understand, don't you? Family has to come first. Family has to come first. The ultimate manipulation, implying that my resistance to their decision meant I didn't value family, as if I hadn't demonstrated my commitment to family over and over again, in ways both seen and unseen. "Yes," I replied, closing the trunk with deliberate care. "Family should come first." I drove away from the house without looking back, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The rational part of my brain suggested calling Melissa immediately, arranging temporary accommodations, contacting a real estate agent to begin apartment hunting. The emotional part wanted to scream, to cry, to drive back and demand justice for the betrayal that had just occurred. Instead, I found myself pulling into a small park 3 miles from my parents' home. Our home. The house that was legally still in their names because I had never thought to change the title. After all, they were my parents. I trusted them. I believed that my contribution was recognized, respected, honored. The sun was setting as I sat on a bench overlooking a small pond, the October air growing chilly. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen, not quite ready to make the call to Melissa that would convert this surreal afternoon into concrete reality. Instead, I opened my email and searched for the most recent mortgage statement. There, it was, proof of my monthly payments, the balance steadily decreasing over the years. 6 years of financial commitment, of sacrifice, of putting my own home ownership dreams on hold to secure my parents' stability. A notification interrupted my thoughts, a text from Victoria. "I'm so sorry, Bex. I tried to tell them we could all make it work. Please don't hate me." I didn't respond. What could I say? That I didn't hate her, but I resented the pattern our family had created? That I was angry not just about today, but about 2 decades of uneven expectations and imbalanced support? That part of me wanted to stop payment on the mortgage and let them all face the consequences of taking me for granted. Instead, I finally called Melissa. "They did what?" Her outrage was immediate and validating. "Rebecca, that's insane. That's your house." "Legally, it's theirs," I reminded her. "I just pay for it." "Semantics," she snapped. "You're coming. Here, right now. The guest room is yours for as long as you need it. And tomorrow, we're calling my brother-in-law. He's a real estate attorney. There has to be some recourse here." Melissa's immediate, unquestioning support loosened something in my chest. For the first time since watching my father change those locks, I took a full breath. "Thank you," I said, my voice finally breaking. I don't understand how they could do this." "Because they've never faced consequences," Melissa replied, her tone gentler now. "Because you've always been the safety net, the problem solver, the responsible one. But Rebecca, This might be the best thing that's ever happened to you. Being kicked out of the house I pay for is the best thing that's ever happened to me? The laugh that escaped me held no humor. No, Melissa said. Being forced to stop setting yourself on fire to keep your family warm is the best thing that could happen to you. Now get in your car and come home to people who actually appreciate you. As I drove toward Melissa's house, her words echoed in my mind. Stop setting yourself on fire to keep your family warm. How long had I been burning? How much of myself had I sacrificed to maintain a family dynamic that, at its core, devalued my contributions while enabling my sister's dependency? The realization hit me with startling clarity. This painful, humiliating afternoon wasn't just an ending. It could be the beginning of something entirely new, a life designed around my needs, my dreams, my future. Not because I was selfish, but because I deserved the same consideration I had always extended to others. The mortgage statement remained open on my phone, a digital receipt of my dedication to family. Tomorrow, I would need to decide whether to continue those payments or finally prioritize my own financial future. Tonight, however, I would allow myself to grieve the loss not just of physical shelter, but of the illusion that sacrifice automatically translates to appreciation. As Melissa's townhouse came into view, I made a silent promise to myself. This would be the last time I gave without boundaries, loved without reciprocity, or valued others' needs above my own worthiness. The daughter who had always understood. Responsibility was finally understanding something equally important: self-respect. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Melissa's guest bedroom became my sanctuary in the days that followed. Clean white walls, a window overlooking a small courtyard garden, and most importantly, a space that was freely offered rather than reluctantly shared. The contrast between this genuine welcome and my family's rejection sharpened my perspective with each passing day. I've scheduled a consultation with Daniel tomorrow at 2, Melissa announced, setting a mug of coffee on the nightstand beside me. 3 days had passed since the lock-changing incident, and I had taken personal leave from the firm to sort through both my practical circumstances and emotional turmoil. Daniel was Melissa's brother-in-law, the real estate attorney she had mentioned. I nodded, grateful for her proactive support, but unsure what legal recourse might actually exist. The house remained in my parents' names, a fact that felt increasingly naive in retrospect. What if there's nothing he can do? I asked, voicing the fear that had kept me awake at night. Legally, it's their house. Melissa sat on the edge of the bed, her expression stern but compassionate. Then you stop paying their mortgage immediately and start investing in your own property. Rebecca, you're a financial advisor. What would you tell a client in your situation? Her question cut through my emotional haze with surgical precision. What would I tell a client? The answer was obvious. Protect yourself financially. Document. The professional clarity I offered others daily had somehow vanished when it came to my own family situation. I'd tell them to stop funding someone else's asset, I admitted, especially when that asset is being used against them. Exactly, Melissa nodded. So take your own professional advice. The consultation with Daniel the following day offered both clarity and limited options. Seated in his downtown office, surrounded by law books and framed credentials, I recounted the details of my arrangement with my parents. So there was never a formal agreement? Daniel confirmed, reviewing my documentation. Mortgage statements, renovation receipts, bank transfers spanning 6 years. Not in writing, I acknowledged. They're my parents. I trusted them. Daniel's expression conveyed compassionate understanding without sugarcoating the reality. Without documentation establishing your equitable interest in the property, some form of agreement acknowledging your contributions were an investment rather than gifts. Your options are limited. He outlined those options methodically. I could file a civil lawsuit based on unjust enrichment or promissory estoppel principles, which would be lengthy, expensive, and potentially damage family relationships beyond repair. Alternatively, I could attempt mediation to reach a settlement, perhaps recovering some portion of my investment. Or, he concluded, you can walk away. Stop payments immediately, redirect those resources toward your own property, and consider this an expensive life lesson about formalizing financial arrangements, even with family. The third option resonated most strongly, though it felt like surrender. Walking away meant accepting that 6 years of payments, nearly $180,000 in total, had effectively been donations rather than investments in my own future. What happens to them if I stop paying? I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it articulated. That depends on their financial situation, Daniel replied. If they can't make the payments, they risk foreclosure. But Rebecca, he leaned forward, his tone gentle but firm, that's not your responsibility anymore. They made this decision when they changed those locks. Later that evening, I sat on Melissa's balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. My phone displayed an email from my mother, the first direct communication since the day they had asked me to leave. Rebecca, your father and I noticed that you haven't yet transferred this month's mortgage payment. We understand you're upset about the current arrangements, but we're counting on your continued support through this transition. Victoria's pregnancy has been difficult, and Jason's job search continues. Family obligations don't disappear because of disagreements. We've packed your remaining belongings and can arrange a time for pickup this weekend. Love, Mom. Family obligations. As if my only value was financial support, my only purpose to facilitate my sister's chaotic life choices. The email contained no acknowledgement of their betrayal, no recognition of my homelessness, no appreciation for years of sacrifice. Just an expectation that the financial pipeline would continue despite everything. What are you going to do? Melissa asked, noticing my expression as I stared at the screen. In that moment, clarity crystallized within me. I'm going to build my own foundation, I replied. Starting now. I drafted a response to my mother, rereading it several times before pressing send. Mom, there will be no additional mortgage payments from me. The financial support I provided for 6 years was given with the understanding that I was contributing to our family home, a place where I would always belong. That understanding was broken when you and Dad changed the locks and prioritized Victoria's needs over my basic right to housing. I've contacted a real estate agent and will be searching for my own property. I suggest you, Dad, Victoria, and Jason develop a financial plan that doesn't include my resources. I'll collect my belongings on Saturday at noon. Rebecca. The response came within minutes. A series of panicked texts and calls that I chose not to answer. Let them feel the weight of consequence, perhaps for the first time. Let them confront the reality of their choices without my immediate rescue. The following morning, I contacted Clara Winters, a real estate agent recommended by Daniel. If I was starting fresh, I wanted a complete reset. Not just a temporary apartment, but a home that truly belonged to me. I'm looking for something with investment potential, I explained during our initial consultation. Perhaps a property with an income unit or something I can renovate to build equity quickly. Clara's expertise proved invaluable. Within days, she had identified several properties that matched my criteria, including a Victorian duplex in an emerging neighborhood. The building needed cosmetic updates but had solid bones, with a spacious owner's unit upstairs and a rental apartment on the ground floor that could offset a significant portion of the mortgage. It's priced below market because the current owners are divorcing and motivated to sell quickly, Clara explained as we toured the property. The rental unit is already tenanted with someone paying fair market rate on a 1-year lease. I walked through the high-ceilinged rooms, running my hands along original woodwork that needed only refinishing to restore its beauty. Large windows flooded the space with natural light, and a small balcony overlooked a fenced garden. Though dated, the kitchen and bathrooms were functional. Updates could happen gradually on my timeline. Most importantly, this property represented something my parents' home never had: genuine independence. No shared space, no competing priorities, no sacrifices disguised as family obligation. The numbers worked surprisingly well. The rental income would cover approximately 40% of the mortgage payment, and my firm partnership provided more than enough to manage the remainder comfortably. I want to make an offer, I decided, sensing opportunity not just financially but emotionally. Slightly below asking, but with flexibility on the closing timeline if that's important to them. Clara nodded approvingly. I'll draft it this afternoon. That Saturday, I arrived at my parents' house, no longer my home, precisely at noon to collect my belongings. My father answered the door, his expression a complex mixture of defensiveness and discomfort. Your things are in the garage, he said, leading me around the side of the house rather than inviting me in. We organized everything as best we could. The garage contained neatly labeled boxes of my possessions: clothes, books, mementos, professional documents. My furniture from the basement apartment was stacked along one wall, much of it showing scuffs and scratches from hasty handling. The physical manifestation of my erasure from the family home sat before me, contained in cardboard and packing tape. Rebecca, my mother appeared in the garage doorway, her voice tentative. We received your email about the mortgage. Surely you don't mean to abandon your family obligations so completely. We can discuss a reduced payment, perhaps, something that acknowledges your current circumstances while still supporting your sister during this difficult time. I continued loading boxes into my SUV without pausing. I'm not discussing financial arrangements today. I'm here for my belongings. But the bank called yesterday, she persisted, anxiety evident in her tone. Without your contribution, we can't make the full payment. Your father's Social Security and my part-time income barely cover the utilities and groceries, especially with Victoria and Jason living here now. For the first time since arriving, I stopped and faced her directly. That sounds like a family meeting you should have with Victoria and Jason. I'm sure together you can develop a solution that doesn't involve the daughter you recently made homeless. The harshness of my phrasing wasn't lost on either of us. My mother flinched visibly, while my father became suddenly engrossed in adjusting boxes that needed no adjustment. You were never homeless, my mother protested weakly. You have resources, options. Victoria doesn't. Victoria has had every opportunity and advantage I had, I countered, my voice steady despite the emotion churning beneath the surface. The difference is that I made choices that created stability, while Victoria consistently made choices that required bailouts. I'm no longer providing those bailouts. It's not abandonment. It's allowing natural consequences to finally occur. As if summoned by our conversation, Victoria appeared in the doorway, her pregnant silhouette backlit by the afternoon sun. Bex, she said softly, using my childhood nickname. Can we talk? Please? Part of me wanted to refuse, to complete this transaction as efficiently as possible, and leave without further engagement. But another part, the part that remembered, braiding her hair for school and helping with science fair projects, couldn't entirely shut her out. 5 minutes, I conceded, following her to the garden bench our father had built when we were children. Victoria sat heavily, one hand supporting her lower back. I never wanted this, she began. I told Mom and Dad we could make it work with you still living downstairs, but they insisted you'd be fine, that you'd understand the need to prioritize the children. She gestured vaguely toward her belly. And what did you say? I asked. When they decided to prioritize your children over their other child's basic security? The question hung between us, highlighting the fundamental imbalance that had defined our family dynamic for decades. Victoria's gaze dropped to her hands. "I didn't fight hard enough," she admitted quietly. "I let it happen because it was easier, because it's always been easier to accept their help than to stand on my own." Her honesty surprised me, a glimpse of self-awareness I hadn't expected. "And now?" I prompted. "Now I'm terrified," Victoria confessed. "Jason still hasn't found work. The mortgage payment is 3 times what he was making at his last job. Anyway, Mom and Dad can't cover it. I have no savings." Tears welled in her eyes. "We might actually lose the house, and it's partly my fault for letting them push you out." 6 months earlier, this admission would have triggered my rescue. Reflex, the deeply ingrained pattern of solving family problems at my own expense. Today, it simply confirmed that my decision to purchase my own property was long overdue. "I signed a purchase agreement yesterday," I told her. "I'm buying a duplex. The basement unit generates rental income." Victoria looked up, surprised momentarily, displacing her distress. "You're buying a house? Already?" "I should have done it years ago instead of paying for someone else's asset," I replied. "And Victoria, you all need to figure out your finances without my input. I'm not continuing the mortgage payments, not after what happened." She nodded slowly, no argument forthcoming. "I understand. I would probably do the same." After a pause, she added, "What happens to us now?" The question was genuine, tinged with the childlike expectation that I would somehow still have the answer, still offer direction even in my justified withdrawal. "That's for you, Jason, and our parents to figure out," I said, standing to indicate our conversation was concluding. "But if I were you, I'd start by selling this house, finding something more affordable for all of you, and finally developing financial independence. It's terrifying at first, but ultimately liberating." As I drove away that afternoon, my vehicle loaded with the physical remnants of my previous life, I felt an unexpected lightness. Not happiness exactly. The betrayal remained too fresh for that, but something equally powerful. The unburdening that comes with establishing clear boundaries and choosing self-respect over familiar patterns. My offer on the Victorian duplex had been accepted. Within 60 days, I would hold keys to a property that was genuinely mine, not a space begrudgingly shared or contingent upon family approval, but a foundation built on my own terms, through my own efforts, for my own future. The structures we build in life reflect our deepest values. For too long, I had constructed my life around supporting others while neglecting to create a secure foundation for myself. Now, brick by brick, I would build something new, a life defined not by obligation but by authentic choice, not by others' expectations but by my own vision. The renovation would begin with me. The Victorian duplex became my sanctuary and symbol of rebirth in equal measure. Closing happened faster than anticipated. The divorcing owners were indeed motivated to sell quickly, and my strong financial position allowed for an expedited process. 6 weeks after being locked out of my parents' home, I stood on the porch of my own property, key in hand, ready to begin the next chapter. "Welcome home, homeowner," Clara said, handing me a small gift bag containing a bottle of champagne and a beautiful brass key holder. "The rental tenant has been informed of the ownership change. He's paid through the end of next month and has excellent rental history." I thanked her and stepped across the threshold, inhaling the distinctive scent of original hardwood and possibility. The previous owners had removed their furniture but left behind quality window treatments and light fixtures, small mercies that reduced my immediate expenses. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating oak floors that needed refinishing but remained structurally sound after more than a century. My furniture from the basement apartment, temporarily stored in Melissa's garage, would arrive the following day. The pieces that had seemed perfectly adequate in my parents' basement suddenly felt mismatched and insufficient for this grand old space with its 11-foot ceilings and elaborate moldings. But that, too, was part of the journey. Growing into a space that reflected my true potential, rather than the diminished role I had accepted for too long. That first night, I slept on an air mattress in what would become my bedroom, surrounded by unpacked boxes and ambitious plans. The house creaked and settled around me, its century-old frame seemingly welcoming its new guardian. For the first time in weeks, I slept deeply and without interruption. Morning brought reality in the form of a comprehensive inspection of my new domain. The property inspector had identified several issues requiring attention: outdated electrical panels, minor bathroom leaks, windows that needed resealing. None were catastrophic, but collectively they presented a substantial project list for a first-time homeowner. Formerly, such challenges would have triggered anxiety and immediate calls to my father for assistance. Today, they represented opportunities to build new skills and relationships. I created a methodical spreadsheet categorizing projects by urgency, cost, and whether they required professional assistance or could become DIY learning experiences. "You need a contractor you can trust," Melissa advised during her first visit. To the property, her designer's eye already envisioning improvements to the space. Someone who won't take advantage of a woman managing renovations alone. "I'm not exactly helpless, Mel," I reminded her, though I appreciated the concern. "I negotiate multi-million-dollar deals at work. I can handle hiring contractors." Nevertheless, I recognized the wisdom in building a reliable team. Through Clara's recommendations and careful vetting, I connected with Sofia Rodriguez, a contractor who specialized in renovating historic properties while honoring their architectural integrity. "This place has great bones," Sofia observed during our initial consultation, running her hand along the original banister. "Most updates can be phased to manage your budget, but I'd prioritize the electrical panel immediately for safety reasons." We developed a 6-month renovation plan that balanced immediate needs with aesthetic improvements, creating a realistic timeline that wouldn't overwhelm my financial resources or daily life. Sophia's transparent approach to budgeting and scheduling provided a refreshing contrast to the ambiguous expectations that had characterized my family relationships. Meanwhile, life at the firm continued. My partners had been understanding about my brief leave of absence, but upon return, I found myself approaching client relationships with renewed perspective. "You're different lately," observed Howard Chen, the senior partner who had mentored me since joining the firm. "More decisive." We were reviewing a complex portfolio restructuring for a family client, and I had just countered several of Howard's suggestions with alternative approaches. "I've gained some personal insight into family financial dynamics," I replied carefully. "It's changed how I view certain planning scenarios." Howard studied me with interest. "Care to elaborate?" "Might be relevant to our advisory approach." I hesitated briefly, then shared a condensed version of recent events: the years of supporting my parents' home, the abrupt exclusion, and my subsequent property purchase. I framed it professionally, emphasizing the importance of formalizing financial arrangements even within families. "That experience has made me more attuned to power imbalances in family financial structures," I concluded. "I'm seeing patterns in our client relationships I might have overlooked before." Howard was silent for a moment before responding. "The firm should develop a specialized advisory module on family financial boundaries. You should lead it." His tone made clear this wasn't merely a suggestion, but an opportunity he expected me to pursue. The proposition was unexpected but intriguing. My personal experience, though painful, had indeed generated insights that could benefit clients navigating complex family financial entanglements. Perhaps transforming my ordeal into professional wisdom could give purpose to the betrayal I had experienced. I'd need to research best practices across different family structures, I mused, already mentally outlining potential approaches. and develop case studies that demonstrate various boundary scenarios. Approved, Howard nodded decisively. Take whatever resources you need. I see significant client interest in this area. The project provided a welcome professional focus. As my personal life continued evolving, weekdays were dedicated to client work and developing the new advisory module. Evenings and weekends transformed into a rhythm of renovation activities. I learned to distinguish load-bearing walls from partitions, to select appropriate period-specific materials, and to negotiate effectively with suppliers. 3 months into home ownership, the duplex's transformation was well underway. The electrical systems had been updated, the master bathroom renovated with classic fixtures that honored the home's vintage while providing modern convenience, and the hardwood floors restored to their original amber glow. The project that had initially seemed overwhelming had become a series of manageable challenges, each completion building my confidence. You should host a housewarming once the kitchen is finished, Melissa suggested one Saturday as we painted the dining room, a rich navy blue that highlighted the room's architectural details. Celebrate what you've accomplished. The suggestion triggered unexpected anxiety. I hadn't entertained guests in my own space before. My years in the apartment had precluded such gatherings. More significantly, I hadn't determined how or whether to include my family in this new chapter of my life. Communication with my parents had become minimal and transactional. They had eventually sold their house, my significant equity investment, lost in the process, and downsized to a small ranch-style home that accommodated Victoria, Jason, and their growing family. The occasional text messages I received from my mother carefully avoided acknowledging the circumstances of our estrangement, instead offering superficial updates or holiday greetings that pretended normalcy. Victoria had made greater efforts. At reconciliation, sending thoughtful messages that respected my boundaries while expressing genuine remorse for her role in what had transpired. Her third child, a daughter, had been born healthy despite the stressful circumstances, and Victoria had recently secured part-time administrative work that accommodated her childcare responsibilities. I'm not sure I'm ready to blend those worlds, I admitted to Melissa. The professional colleagues who respect my capabilities with the family who consistently undervalued them. Then don't, Melissa replied simply. Your home, your rules. Invite who brings positive energy to your life. This is about celebrating your independence, not forcing reconciliations that haven't been earned. Her perspective liberated me from the obligation I'd felt to include family in all significant life events, another pattern that needed reconsideration. I decided to host 2 separate gatherings, a cocktail reception for colleagues and friends, to celebrate both the home renovation and my new professional initiative, and later, a more intimate dinner where I could determine on my own terms what role, if any, my family might play in my evolving life. The professional gathering exceeded my expectations. 20 colleagues and friends mingled throughout the newly renovated main floor, admiring the blend of historic charm and contemporary function I'd created with Sophia's guidance. Howard brought his wife, who requested a private tour and offered sincere compliments on my design choices. Several colleagues expressed interest in the Family Financial Boundaries project, sharing anecdotes from their own client experiences that affirmed the need for such specialized guidance. You've created something remarkable here, Clara commented, gesturing around the space she had helped me acquire. And not just the property renovation. What do you mean? I asked. You've transformed a crisis into a foundation for both personal and professional growth, she explained. Not everyone manages that pivot. Most people either collapse under betrayal or become hardened by it. You've done neither. Her observation resonated deeply. The past months had indeed been transformative beyond the obvious property acquisition. I had developed new skills, expanded my professional focus, and perhaps most significantly, established healthier patterns of giving and receiving. The boundaries. I now maintained weren't walls of resentment, but rather clear delineations of mutual respect, present in my business relationships, friendships, and increasingly, my evolving family dynamics. The following week brought an unexpected development. While reviewing the rental portion of my duplex for potential updates, I received a call from Victoria. "I hope I'm not overstepping," she began tentatively, "but I wanted to ask your professional advice about something." The request surprised me. Victoria had never shown interest in financial planning beyond securing immediate assistance for perpetual crises. "What kind of advice?" I asked, my tone neutral. "Jason and I want to create an actual budget and savings plan," she explained. "The past few months have been a wake-up call. We're living with Mom and Dad, which works for now, but we need our own place eventually. I don't want to repeat the same patterns anymore." Her request represented a significant shift, acknowledging the need for financial self-sufficiency rather than assuming continued family support. The sister who had always expected rescue was tentatively reaching for independence. "This isn't something we should discuss casually," I replied after considering her request. "If you're serious, I can recommend a financial counselor who specializes in family budgeting and first-time home buying." "Could you—" Victoria hesitated. "Would you be willing to meet with us first, just to help us understand where to start? I trust your judgment more than a stranger's." The request presented a crossroads. Professional assistance would maintain clearer boundaries, but perhaps this represented an opportunity to establish a healthier adult relationship with my sister, one based on shared growth rather than enabling patterns. "I'll meet with you once to establish basic directions," I decided. "After that, you'll need to work with the counselor I recommend for ongoing planning. And Victoria, this needs to be a commitment, not just a temporary response to current circumstances." "I understand," she replied, her tone carrying unexpected maturity. "We're ready to make real changes. Your new house. It made me realize we could build something for ourselves too, if we actually learned to manage what we have instead of always looking for the next bailout." We arranged to meet the following weekend at a neutral coffee shop rather than at either of our homes. The boundary felt important, establishing that this was a consultative discussion rather than a return to previous family patterns. As I ended the call, I recognized that something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in our adult lives, Victoria was approaching me not for immediate financial assistance, but for knowledge transfer, the tools to build her own stability rather than "ye lie you mine." Whether this represented a lasting change remained to be seen, but it suggested the possibility of a relationship founded on mutual respect rather than dependence. That evening, as autumn rain tapped gently against the restored windows of my Victorian duplex, I sat in the reading nook I'd created, in the master bedroom, surveying the space I had transformed through deliberate choices, hard work, and newfound confidence. The contrast between my current circumstances and those of just 4 months earlier was striking. Not just in physical surroundings, but in my fundamental approach to relationships, boundaries, and self-worth. The betrayal that had initially seemed catastrophic had instead become catalytic, forcing a necessary reconstruction of both my physical foundation and my personal values. The walls of this house, unlike the ones I had left behind, represented not obligation, but opportunity, not compromise, but choice. Here, finally, I was building a life measured by my own blueprint rather than by others' expectations. As I prepared for sleep, my phone chimed with an email notification, the final approval for the Family Financial Boundaries Advisory module I had developed. The project would launch the following quarter, transforming my personal ordeal into professional wisdom that might help others navigate similar challenges. In losing what I thought was my foundation, I had discovered something far more valuable: the capacity to build one of my own design, stone by stone, choice by choice, boundary by necessary boundary. The renovation, it seemed, had extended far beyond the physical structure surrounding me. The coffee shop meeting with Victoria and Jason turned out to be surprisingly productive. I arrived early, selecting a corner table that offered both privacy and a clear exit, emotional boundaries manifesting in physical space. When they entered, I noticed immediate changes in my sister's demeanor. Victoria walked with more purpose than I'd seen in years, a leather-bound notebook clutched in one hand while she guided her toddler with the other. Jason followed carrying their infant daughter in a carrier, his expression a mixture of discomfort and determination. "Thank you for doing this," Victoria said after we'd settled, ordered drinks, and arranged the children with coloring books and bottles. "We've spent the past week documenting all our expenses and income. It's eye-opening." She slid the notebook toward me. Inside, I found meticulously recorded figures, every expenditure categorized, income sources listed, debts inventoried, with interest rates and payment schedules. The level of detail surprised me. This wasn't a half-hearted gesture, but a genuine attempt at financial literacy. "This is an excellent start," I acknowledged, reviewing their numbers. "Much more comprehensive than I expected." Jason leaned forward. "It was humbling to see it all written down. We've been living in a fantasy world financially." Their combined income was modest, but not impossible to work with. The debt load was concerning. Credit cards with high interest rates, an underwater car loan, medical bills from their children's births, but not insurmountable with proper management. Most revealing was their complete lack of savings or emergency funds, the financial manifestation of lives built on immediate gratification and expected bailouts. "Here's what I see," I began, outlining 3 key observations. First, your debt-to-income ratio is preventing any meaningful progress. Second, your housing situation, while temporary, isn't building equity. Third, you've never established financial independence because you've always had safety nets. I expected defensiveness. Instead, Victoria nodded. "That's exactly right. We need to break the cycle." For the next hour, I outlined a 3-phase approach. Immediate debt reduction through consolidation and prioritized payments, establishment of emergency savings, and eventual transition to independent housing within their means. I emphasized that the process would take at least 2 years of consistent effort before they could realistically consider home ownership. 2 years feels like forever, Victoria admitted. "It's a blink compared to a lifetime of financial insecurity," I countered. "And this timeline assumes no relapses into old spending patterns." Before concluding, I referred them to Leila Campos, a financial counselor who specialized in young families rebuilding credit. "She'll hold you accountable in ways I can't as your sister. This is professional territory now, not family obligation." As we prepared to leave, Victoria hesitated, then asked, "Would you consider coming for dinner sometime? At Mom and Dad's? They won't admit it, but they miss you." The invitation triggered complex emotions. My parents hadn't reached out directly since their perfunctory holiday texts. Their missing me was being communicated through Victoria, maintaining their pattern of avoiding direct accountability. "I'm not ready for that," I replied honestly. "The breach of trust wasn't just about the house, Victoria. It was about years of uneven expectations and taken-for-granted contributions." She nodded, disappointment evident but not pressuring further. "I understand, but if you ever are ready, the invitation stands." We parted with a brief hug, our first physical contact since the lock-changing day. It wasn't reconciliation exactly, but perhaps the beginning of a relationship recalibrated on healthier terms. The following week brought an unexpected development at the firm. Howard called me into his office, where I found him reviewing the final presentation for the Family Financial Boundaries initiative I had developed. "The executive committee is impressed," he stated without preamble. "They want to expand this into a complete service division, not just an advisory module, and they want you to head it. The proposition was significantly beyond what we had initially discussed, not just creating advisory materials, but establishing an entirely new practice area within the firm. That's a substantial expansion of scope, I observed, carefully neutral while my mind raced through implications. What would that entail practically? Your own team, dedicated marketing resources, eventually your name on the letterhead, Howard replied. He slid a folder across the desk. The committee has approved a preliminary budget and staffing plan for your review. This is no small opportunity, Rebecca. The folder contained a comprehensive proposal, salary increase, equity adjustment, staffing allocations, and implementation timeline. The financial terms were generous, but the professional recognition represented something perhaps more valuable: acknowledgement of the unique perspective I brought to the firm. Why this initiative? Why now? I asked, seeking to understand the broader context for such significant resource allocation. Howard leaned back, considering. 3 factors. First, our client data shows increasing concerns about intergenerational wealth transfers being undermined by boundary issues. Second, the pandemic accelerated complex family financial entanglements that are creating conflicts among our high-net-worth clients. And third, he paused, offering a rare personal observation. Your approach to this topic carries uncommon authenticity. You've lived these challenges, processed them professionally rather than emotionally, and created actionable frameworks from that experience. The validation wasn't just professionally gratifying, but personally healing. My family might have failed to value my contributions, but my professional community recognized the wisdom born from that painful experience. I'll need the weekend to review this properly, I responded, unwilling to make such a significant decision without careful consideration. But my initial reaction is positive. That evening, I discussed the opportunity with Melissa over dinner. In my newly completed kitchen, a space that had transformed from outdated inefficiency to the heart of my home. It's perfect for you, Melissa observed, sampling the risotto I'd prepared. But I'm curious, does leading this initiative feel like continuing to define yourself through family trauma? Or does it feel like reclaiming that experience as expertise? Her question cut to the heart of my hesitation. Was building a professional identity around family financial boundaries a form of healing or merely repackaging trauma as career advancement? I think it's both, I admitted after reflection. Part of me wonders if I'm still orbiting around family dynamics even as I try to establish independence. But another part recognizes that transforming personal challenge into professional wisdom is actually the healthiest possible integration. The difference is agency, Melissa suggested. Before, family expectations happened to you. Now, you're choosing how to frame and use that experience. That's the definition of reclamation. Her perspective helped clarify my thinking. By Monday morning, I had decided to accept the position with some negotiated adjustments to ensure I maintained balance between this new professional focus and my continued personal growth. The months that followed brought cascading changes that extended far beyond my professional advancement. The Family Financial Boundaries Division launched successfully, attracting significant client interest and media attention. I assembled a team of advisors who brought diverse perspectives to the work, ensuring our approach transcended my personal experience to address a wide spectrum of family financial dynamics. Simultaneously, my rental tenant gave notice of his planned relocation, creating an unexpected opportunity. Rather than immediately seeking a replacement, I considered alternatives for the ground floor unit. The rental income had been convenient, but not essential to my financial stability. What might serve my broader goals more effectively? The answer emerged during a conversation with Sophia, who had become both my renovation contractor and friend through our work on the Victorian. Small business incubation spaces are in high demand, she mentioned when I described my vacancy. especially for women entrepreneurs who need professional meeting space but can't afford commercial leases. My sister runs a graphic design business from her dining room because dedicated office space is financially out of reach. The concept resonated immediately. With modest adaptations, the ground floor apartment could become a shared workspace for women building independent businesses, a physical manifestation of the financial empowerment I now advocated professionally. Within 6 weeks, Foundation Studios was established in the renovated ground floor space. The living room became a conference area with presentation technology. The bedroom transformed into a photography studio with professional lighting. The kitchen evolved into a break room and casual meeting space. 4 women entrepreneurs, a graphic designer, a financial planner, a wedding photographer, and a social media consultant, became founding members, each contributing to operating costs while gaining access to professional space that elevated their businesses. The arrangement provided more than just functional workspace. These women formed an informal support network, sharing leads, collaborating on projects, and celebrating each other's successes. I found myself increasingly drawn into their community, offering occasional guidance on business structures or growth strategies while learning from their diverse entrepreneurial approaches. "You've created something remarkable here," observed Carolina, the photographer, during our quarterly members' dinner. "Not just a workspace, but a genuine ecosystem for women's financial independence." The comment captured what had evolved organically from an empty rental unit, a microcosm of mutual support and practical empowerment. Foundation Studios became not just a physical space, but a manifestation of the values I now embodied. Independence coupled with community, financial acumen balanced with creative expression, boundaries that enabled connection rather than preventing it. As autumn transitioned to winter, Victoria reached out with surprising news. She and Jason had completed Layla's financial counseling program and systematically reduced their highest interest debt while building their first-ever emergency fund. "It's only $2,000 so far," Victoria explained during our phone call. "But that's $2,000 more than we've ever saved before. And we're sticking to the budget every month." Her pride was genuine and earned. The sister who had always expected rescue was experiencing the dignity of self-sufficiency, however modest the beginning. "Layla says we might be ready for a small condo of our own by next summer if we maintain our current progress," she continued. "Something modest but stable. The kids deserve their own space, and so do Mom and Dad after all this time." The acknowledgement of our parents' need for their own life, separate from perpetual caretaking, represented significant emotional maturation. Victoria was finally recognizing the impact of her dependencies on others' lives, awareness I once thought beyond her capacity. "That's substantial progress," I acknowledged. "Consistent small steps create permanent change in ways that dramatic gestures never can." "I learned that from watching you with your house," Victoria admitted. "You didn't try to do everything at once. You created a plan and worked it systematically." After a pause, she added, "I'm trying to be more like you in that way." The comment caught me off guard. Throughout our lives, I had been the responsible but boring sister while Victoria was the vibrant but chaotic one. The idea that she now saw value in my methodical approach represented a fundamental shift in our dynamic. "The holiday situation is awkward," Victoria ventured after a moment. "Mom's been asking if you'll come for Christmas dinner. I told her she should call you directly, but—" She trailed off, the implication clear. Our mother was still avoiding direct communication that might require acknowledging past wrongs. "I have other plans for Christmas," I replied, which was true. I had accepted an invitation to join Melissa's family gathering, where I was welcomed without the weight of complicated history. "But," I continued, making a decision in that moment, "I could host a small New Year's gathering at my house. Nothing elaborate, just family if you're interested. No pressure either way." The invitation represented a calculated step toward controlled reconnection. New Year's carried symbolic weight, the possibility of fresh beginnings, while hosting in my own space maintained the power balance I needed to feel secure in family interactions. "We would love that," Victoria responded, her voice brightening. "All of us would." After we ended the call, I sat in my reading nook, contemplating the implications of my spontaneous invitation. Was I ready to welcome my parents into the home I had created precisely because they had excluded me from theirs? The symmetry felt both appropriate and slightly unnerving. The invitation wasn't about forgiveness exactly. That would require acknowledgement and accountability I wasn't confident they could offer. Rather, it represented a choice to engage from a position of strength rather than need. The daughter they had taken for granted was now extending hospitality from a foundation they had no part in creating. The power dynamic had fundamentally shifted. That evening, I wrote in the journal I had begun keeping when I purchased the Victorian, a record of both the physical renovation and my parallel personal reconstruction. The entry explored the concept of creating new patterns rather than simply reacting against old ones, of building relationships based on current realities rather than historical grievances. The final paragraph captured my evolving perspective. The greatest freedom may not be in cutting ties but in transforming them, not from obligation but from choice, not from habit but from conscious intention. The woman who pays her own mortgage makes different decisions than the daughter who funded someone else's home. I am becoming that woman, brick by brick, boundary by boundary, choice by conscious choice. As I closed the journal, my phone chimed with a notification from Foundation Studios group chat. Carolina had booked her first corporate client, a significant professional advancement made possible partly through the professional presentation space now available to her. The members were organizing an impromptu celebration. I texted my congratulations and promised to bring champagne. The ripple effects of my forced independence continued expanding in unexpected directions, touching lives beyond my own. The betrayal that had initially seemed catastrophic had instead catalyzed concentric circles of transformation. My own rebuilding, Victoria's financial maturation, the Foundation Studios community, the firm's new practice area. The renovation, it seemed, extended far beyond mere walls and windows. It had become a blueprint for reconstruction on many levels, a template for turning crisis into creation. The foundation stones had been laid in pain, but the structure rising from them grew stronger, more authentic, and more connected with each deliberate choice. The mortgage I now paid secured more than property. It purchased the freedom to rebuild relationship on my terms, to extend or withhold connection based on genuine reciprocity rather than obligation. The price of independence had been high, but its value proved immeasurable. New Year's Eve arrived crisp and clear, with afternoon sunlight streaming through my freshly washed windows, illuminating the preparations for my family gathering. I had approached the evening with deliberate intention, transforming my dining room into a space that balanced elegance with approachability. The antique table, a restoration piece I discovered at an estate sale, was set with simple white china, crystal glassware, and arrangements of winter greenery that Melissa had helped assemble. The menu reflected similar consideration. Sophisticated, enough to demonstrate my new life, but comforting enough to ease potential tensions. A roasted rack of lamb, truffle risotto, winter vegetable medley, and chocolate soufflé for dessert. All dishes I had mastered during cooking classes I'd begun taking as part of my expanded self-development. At precisely 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a steadying breath before opening it to find Victoria, Jason, and their children on my porch, arms full of carefully wrapped packages and children's paraphernalia. "I know we're early," Victoria apologized, but the kids were too excited to wait anymore. "Is that okay?" I welcomed them inside, accepting hugs from my niece and nephew while directing Jason where to place the portable crib for the baby. Victoria's eyes widened as she took in the transformed space. So different from both my parents' traditional suburban home and my former basement apartment. "This is stunning, Bex," she breathed, running her hand along the restored banister. "I've seen the pictures you sent, but in person it feels like you. Strong but beautiful. Classic but not stuck in the past." Her observation caught me by surprise, perceptive in a way Victoria had rarely demonstrated before. Perhaps I wasn't the only one who had evolved during our months of limited contact. The children's natural curiosity diffused potential awkwardness as they explored the child-safe areas I had prepared, exclaiming over the holiday decorations and tiny stuffed animals I had placed strategically around the main floor. Jason, typically quiet in family gatherings, engaged me in genuine conversation about the renovation process, revealing unexpected knowledge about historic preservation. "I've been taking construction management courses online," he explained, when I commented on his familiarity with restoration techniques. "After the housing situation. Well, it made me realize I need marketable skills that can't be easily outsourced. Construction superintendents are always in demand, and with my background in architectural drafting, it's a natural fit." The revelation that Jason had previous training surprised me. He had cycled through retail and service jobs for as long as I'd known him, never mentioning relevant education. "The classes have given me direction," he continued, his expression more animated than I'd ever witnessed. "For the first time, I feel like I'm building towards something sustainable rather than just chasing the next paycheck." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang again, signaling my parents' arrival. The momentary tension that rippled through me was physical, a constriction in my chest, a reflexive straightening of my posture. Victoria noticed, touching my arm gently. "Remember, this is your house," she murmured. "Your terms." I opened the door to find my parents standing awkwardly on the porch, more formally dressed than the occasion warranted. My mother clutched a bouquet of store-bought flowers and a bakery box. My father held a gift bag with tissue paper protruding from the top. "Rebecca," my mother began, her voice tighter than usual. "Thank you for inviting us. Your home is lovely from the outside." I accepted their offerings with appropriate thanks, leading them into the foyer where they paused to take in their surroundings. My father's professional eye assessed the restoration work, his expression shifting from polite interest to genuine appreciation as he noted the original woodwork I had meticulously restored. "You've done quality work here," he observed, running his hand along the refinished doorframe. "This level of craftsmanship isn't common anymore." "I had excellent contractors," I acknowledged, "but I did much of the finish work myself. YouTube tutorials and weekend workshops can teach you almost anything if you're motivated." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You did this? The staining, the finish work?" "And the tile work in the bathrooms, most of the painting, and the kitchen. Backsplash," I added, allowing myself a moment of pride. "The electrical and plumbing required professionals, of course, but the cosmetic aspects became something of a passion project." A complex emotion crossed my father's face. Surprise mingled with something that might have been respect or perhaps regret. The father who had changed locks to exclude me was now admiring the home I had created without his assistance, experiencing tangible evidence of capabilities he had consistently overlooked. The initial awkwardness gradually eased as we moved through dinner, the children providing natural conversation bridges when adult dialogue faltered. I maintained the poise of a confident hostess rather than a daughter seeking approval, serving each course with professional precision and facilitating conversation with gentle direction. It wasn't until dessert that my mother finally broached the subject that had undoubtedly occupied her thoughts all evening. "Your career seems to be flourishing," she observed as I served the chocolate soufflés. "Victoria mentioned you've started a new division at your firm?" The question provided an opening to share my professional evolution without defensiveness. I outlined the Family Financial Boundaries Initiative, its client impact, and my leadership role, emphasizing the positive outcomes rather than the personal experience that had inspired it. "That's remarkable," my mother responded, her expression suggesting she was reassessing certain assumptions. "I hadn't realized your work had such depth." The acknowledgement, while gratifying, also highlighted how little interest my parents had previously shown in my professional development. The daughter who had faithfully funded their mortgage had remained largely unknown to them in fundamental ways. "Rebecca has always had depth," Victoria interjected unexpectedly. "We just didn't always pay attention to it because she never created crises that demanded focus." The observation landed like a stone in still water, creating ripples of uncomfortable recognition around the table. My father shifted in his seat. My mother's hand faltered slightly as she reached for her water glass. "That's insightful, Victoria," I acknowledged, choosing neither to soften her statement nor to amplify it. Functional family members often become background elements precisely because they function well. "We've made mistakes," my father said, abruptly, his gaze fixed on his dessert rather than meeting my eyes. "Serious ones." The acknowledgement, while lacking specificity, represented the first direct admission that their actions had been wrong rather than merely necessary or misunderstood. My mother remained silent, her expression suggesting internal struggle. "Yes," I agreed simply. "You have." The moment balanced on a knife's edge, I could demand elaboration, enumerate grievances, or accept this limited acknowledgement as a beginning. The woman I had been 6 months earlier might have seized the opportunity to extract explicit apologies. The woman I had become recognized that genuine relationship transformation couldn't be forced through a single conversation. "I'm learning that most family systems contain patterns that serve some members at the expense of others," I continued after a moment. "Breaking those patterns is difficult, but essential for everyone's growth. My work with clients has shown me that these dynamics rarely happen through malice. They evolve gradually through unchallenged assumptions and path dependencies." My professional framing offered a perspective that neither excused their actions nor condemned them as irredeemable. It created space for recognition without requiring immediate resolution, a foundation for potential rebuilding rather than an ultimatum. "We should have valued what you provided," my mother said quietly, finally meeting my gaze. "Not just financially, but in every way. We took your stability for granted while focusing entirely on Victoria's challenges." The admission, though still limited, acknowledged the core imbalance that had characterized our family dynamic. Victoria reached across the table to touch my hand, a gesture of solidarity rather than the defensiveness such a statement might once have triggered in her. "I took advantage too," she added. "It was easier to accept help than to face my own responsibility. Everyone enabled everyone else in different ways." Jason nodded, his arm around their oldest child. "We're working to break that cycle. Not just for ourselves, but for our kids. They deserve parents who stand on their own feet." The conversation shifted then to their progress. The debt reduction plan, Jason's education, Victoria's part-time work. They shared both achievements and setbacks with refreshing honesty, neither minimizing challenges nor expecting immediate solutions from me. The family that had once operated through crisis and rescue was attempting, however imperfectly, to establish healthier patterns. As the evening concluded, my father lingered in the foyer while the others prepared the children for departure. He studied the framed architectural drawing I had hung near the entrance, a sketch of the Victorians' original facade that I had discovered in city archives and restored. "I should have taught you more," he said unexpectedly. "About buildings, about restoration. You clearly have an aptitude I never recognized." The statement contained layers of acknowledgement, of my capabilities, of his failure to nurture them, of opportunities missed through narrow perception. "I found excellent teachers when I needed them," I replied, neither absolving him nor rejecting. The belated recognition. There's considerable satisfaction in learning to build something properly from the foundation up. He nodded, understanding the dual reference. Your foundation here is excellent, both literally and. He gestured vaguely, searching for words. In other ways, you've built something substantial. It wasn't an explicit apology for the betrayal that had precipitated my independent home ownership, but it contained genuine acknowledgement of what I had created from that painful catalyst. For this initial reconnection, perhaps that represented sufficient beginning. After they departed, Victoria with a warm hug, my parents with more reserved farewells, I moved through my quiet home, extinguishing candles and gathering dishes. The evening had been neither perfect reconciliation nor continued estrangement, but something more nuanced. The first careful construction of a potentially different relationship architecture, one built on current realities rather than entrenched patterns. I was completing kitchen cleanup when my phone chimed with a text from Howard. Financial Times wants to interview you for their special section on family wealth dynamics. Your thought leadership is gaining traction. Congratulations. The professional recognition provided satisfying counterpoint to the evening's emotional complexities. The woman who had once defined herself primarily through family obligation was now recognized for expertise, vision, and leadership. The path that had begun with painful exclusion had led to expanded inclusion in realms I might never have explored otherwise. Later that evening, as midnight approached and a new year beckoned, I stepped onto my second-floor balcony overlooking the garden. The winter air carried crystalline clarity, stars visible despite the city lights. From this elevation, both physical and metaphorical, I could survey the distance traveled since that devastating afternoon when locks were changed and assumptions shattered. The journey had transformed not just my physical circumstances, but my fundamental understanding of worth, contribution, and relationship. The woman who had faithfully funded someone else's mortgage had become the architect of her own foundation, one solid enough to support not just independent living, but deliberate connection, professional advancement, and community contribution. The Victorian that had initially represented escape now embodied possibility. Its renovated spaces hosted not just my personal life, but Foundation Studios' entrepreneurial community, and potentially evolving family relationships reconfigured on healthier terms. The home's transformation paralleled my own, honoring original elements worth preserving while replacing damaged structures with stronger materials, creating a renovation that respected history without being constrained by it. As midnight struck and distant fireworks illuminated the horizon, I allowed myself to acknowledge the paradoxical truth that had emerged from months of reconstruction. Strength built from betrayal, independence forged through abandonment, wisdom distilled from painful experience. The family that had locked me out had inadvertently unlocked capacities I might never have discovered otherwise. This recognition wasn't about gratitude for mistreatment, but rather appreciation for my response to it, the resilience, creativity, and determination that had transformed crisis into foundation. The mortgage statements that now arrived in my name represented more than financial obligation. They documented a reclamation of personal agency, a declaration that my contributions would henceforth build my own equity rather than subsidizing others' security. The new year stretched before me filled with continuing possibilities. The expansion of my professional initiative, potential evolution of family relationships, ongoing development of Foundation Studios, and personal growth in areas previously neglected while focusing on others' needs. The woman who had once measured her value through family approval now defined success through integrity, contribution, and authentic connection. As the final fireworks faded, I returned inside to my beautifully restored home, a space that reflected not what others expected, but what I had envisioned and created. The daughter who had always understood responsibility had finally embraced an equally important truth. The foundation that truly matters is the one you build within yourself. secure enough to withstand betrayal, strong enough to support independence, and generous enough to welcome connection on terms of mutual respect rather than obligation. The mortgage was now mine alone, but the life it sheltered had expanded beyond measure. Spring arrived with unexpected opportunities and growth in multiple dimensions of my life. As cherry blossoms adorned the trees lining my street, I found myself navigating an expanding landscape of professional recognition, community engagement, and evolving family dynamics. The Financial Times interview Howard had mentioned on New Year's Eve developed into a feature article highlighting the innovative approach our firm was taking to family financial boundaries. The piece positioned me as a thought leader in a previously underaddressed area of wealth management, generating significant attention from both potential clients and industry peers. We've received 14 new client inquiries directly referencing the article, Howard reported during our weekly strategy meeting. And 3 competing firms have reached out about potential collaboration. You've clearly identified a significant market need. The professional validation was gratifying, but the true reward came through client impact. Families that had struggled with boundary violations and financial entanglements were finding pathways to healthier relationships through our structured approach. Each successful intervention reinforced that transforming personal challenge into professional wisdom had created value extending far beyond my individual experience. The Peterson family implementation has exceeded expectations, I shared with Howard. After 3 generations of destructive financial enmeshment, they've established clear boundaries around wealth transfer while maintaining supportive family relationships. The patriarch actually told me he sleeps better knowing his assets will support rather than undermine his children's independence. Howard nodded appreciatively. That's the real measurement of our success, not just protecting wealth, but fostering healthy family systems around it. After a thoughtful pause, he added, "The firm wants to send you to the International Wealth Management Conference in London next month. Your perspective deserves a global platform." The invitation represented significant professional advancement, recognition that my approach had relevance beyond regional or even national boundaries. The London conference would connect me with wealth advisors from around the world, expanding both my professional network and the potential impact of our methodology. "I'd be honored to represent the firm," I replied, already mentally cataloging presentation points that would resonate with an international audience. Different cultures approached family financial boundaries with varying assumptions and traditions, creating both challenges and opportunities for our framework. As my professional influence expanded, Foundation Studios was undergoing its own evolution. What had begun as shared workspace for 4 women entrepreneurs had grown into a vibrant community of 12 members utilizing the space on flexible schedules. The demand had exceeded our capacity, creating both challenges and opportunities. "We need to think about expansion," Carolina suggested during our monthly members' meeting. "There's a vacant commercial space 2 blocks from here that would be perfect for a second location. It needs renovation, but that's kind of our specialty now, isn't it?" The proposal was both exhilarating and daunting. Expanding Foundation Studios would require significant investment, formalized business structure, and greater time commitment. Yet the impact we had already witnessed, women building financial independence through entrepreneurship, aligned perfectly with my core values. "If we pursue this, we need to approach it strategically," I cautioned. "Proper business entity formation, clear operating agreements, sustainable financial modeling. I'm willing to invest, but we should all understand exactly what we're building." The members responded enthusiastically to this balanced approach, volunteering professional skills to support the expansion, legal expertise from one member, architectural visualization from another, marketing strategy from a third. The collaborative energy reflected the community we had created, women empowering each other while building individual strength. After thorough evaluation, we decided to proceed with the expansion. I would provide the majority of capital investment, as the primary stakeholder, while members contributed according to their means and received proportional equity. The structure balanced my financial risk with shared ownership that gave everyone a meaningful stake in our collective success. "This isn't just about workspace anymore," observed Lydia, a recent addition to the community who specialized in nonprofit development. "We're creating an ecosystem for women's financial empowerment. That deserves proper structure and intentional growth." The second location would incorporate lessons learned from our original space: dedicated podcast recording facilities, improved photography studio, expandable conference rooms, and childcare accommodations for members with young children. The renovation would require significant work, but offered the opportunity to create purpose-built space rather than adapting existing residential configurations. As Foundation Studios' expansion moved forward, my relationship with Victoria continued its gradual evolution. True to their commitment, she and Jason had maintained their financial discipline, building modest savings while systematically reducing debt. Victoria had increased her work hours as their youngest child reached toddlerhood, contributing more significantly to their household income. "We're pre-approved for a mortgage," she announced during one of our monthly coffee meetings, a tradition we had established to maintain connection without the complications of full family gatherings. "It's for a small townhouse near the community college where Jason is finishing his certification. Nothing fancy, but it would be ours." The pride in her voice reflected genuine accomplishment. The sister who had once expected rescue was creating her own stability through consistent effort rather than crisis management. "That's significant progress," I acknowledged, "especially considering where you started 18 months ago." Victoria nodded, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "The funny thing is, now that we qualify for the mortgage, we're being extremely cautious about proceeding. We're actually considering waiting another 6 months to build a larger down payment." She laughed softly. "Who would have thought I'd ever delay gratification voluntarily?" The transformation in her approach reflected deeper maturation beyond mere financial discipline. Victoria was developing the capacity for strategic thinking rather than reactive decision-making, a fundamental shift in her approach to life's challenges. "Mom and Dad are struggling with our potential move," she admitted after a pause. "They've gotten used to having the grandchildren nearby, but we've been clear that our decision needs to prioritize our financial independence, even if it means less convenient family arrangements." The boundary she described would have been unimaginable in our family's previous dynamic, where parental preferences typically overrode adult children's autonomous decisions. Victoria's willingness to maintain this boundary despite discomfort represented significant emotional growth. "How are they responding to that clarity?" I asked, genuinely curious about my parents' adjustment to these changing dynamics. "Better than I expected, actually," Victoria replied. "Dad's been helping Jason research commuting options from different neighborhoods. Mom's more emotional about it, but she's not attempting to manipulate our decision." After a thoughtful pause, she added, "I think what happened with you changed something fundamental for them. They're more careful now about respecting adult children's choices." The observation suggested my parents were capable of growth I might have previously doubted, learning from consequences rather than simply reacting to them. While this evolution didn't erase their previous actions, it indicated capacity for relationship recalibration that might eventually lead to healthier connections. My direct interactions with my parents remained limited. Occasional family gatherings where our exchanges were polite but contained. Text messages acknowledging birthdays or holidays, practical communications when necessary. The deliberate distance, maintained boundaries I needed while allowing gradual assessment of whether authentic relationship reconstruction might be possible. As spring advanced toward summer, these various evolving relationships, professional, community, and family, created a richly textured life far different from the narrowly defined existence I had inhabited while living in my parents' basement. The woman who had once measured her worth primarily through family service now engaged with multiple communities of impact, each relationship offering different dimensions of connection and contribution. The London conference approached quickly, necessitating significant preparation alongside my existing responsibilities. The international platform required adapting our methodology to diverse cultural contexts while maintaining its core principles. I worked evening hours developing presentation materials that would resonate with wealth advisors from various regions, consulting with colleagues who had international expertise. The week before my departure, I received an unexpected text from my father. Saw the article about your London presentation. Very impressive. Your mother and I are proud of what you've accomplished. The message represented the most direct acknowledgement of my professional achievement they had ever offered. Previously, my career had been treated as a convenient resource for family needs rather than a genuine accomplishment deserving recognition. This shift, while seemingly small, indicated evolving perception of my independent value beyond familial utility. I responded with simple thanks, neither effusively grateful for belated recognition nor dismissive of the gesture. The measured exchange felt appropriate to our current relationship stage, acknowledging positive steps without prematurely declaring complete reconciliation. The morning of my departure for London, Foundation Studios members organized a surprise send-off breakfast, presenting me with a professionally bound journal embossed with global wisdom on its cover. For recording insights from around the world, Carolina explained, and for remembering that your voice deserves this international platform. Their support contrasted sharply with my family's historical response to my professional advancement. These women celebrated my success without qualification, recognizing achievement without immediately converting it into obligation. The community we had built demonstrated how relationships could foster mutual growth rather than creating dependency or exploitation. The 10-day London trip exceeded my expectations professionally. My presentation on cultural contexts of financial boundaries generated significant engagement, with wealth advisors from Singapore, Brazil, Germany, and South Africa seeking further discussion about implementing our methodology within their specific cultural frameworks. Your approach bridges a critical gap in wealth management, observed Eliza Kwan, head of family services for a major Asian financial institution. We've developed sophisticated technical tools, but often neglect the human systems that determine whether wealth transfer succeeds or fails. I'd be interested in exploring how your methodology might be adapted for collectivist cultures where boundaries are conceptualized differently. These conversations expanded my professional perspective beyond domestic frameworks, highlighting how family financial patterns reflected deeper cultural assumptions about obligation, success, and intergenerational responsibility. The global context enriched my understanding of the very dynamics I had experienced personally, positioning them within broader human patterns rather than merely individual family dysfunction. Beyond professional development, the international travel provided valuable personal expansion. I explored London independently during free evenings, visiting museums, attending theater performances, and discovering neighborhoods beyond typical tourist destinations. The woman who had once centered her life around family obligations was developing comfort with solo adventures, finding joy in self-directed experiences rather than deriving identity solely through service to others. In my hotel room each evening, I recorded observations in the journal Foundation Studios had given me, documenting not just professional insights, but personal revelations emerging from this international experience. The entries tracked an expanding sense of possibility, professionally, intellectually, and personally. The final journal entry before returning home captured this evolution. The foundations we build determine what structures our lives can support. The cramped basement apartment could never have contained the person I'm becoming. Each boundary established, each independent choice made, each new relationship formed on terms of mutual respect rather than obligation, All have created capacity for experiences I couldn't previously imagine. The mortgage that once represented sacrifice now funds expansion in every dimension. Returning home, I viewed my Victorian duplex with fresh appreciation. The house that had initially represented escape from betrayal had evolved into the launching pad for expanding horizons, professional influence extending internationally, community impact growing through Foundation Studios' expansion, and personal development continuing through deliberate choices rather than reactive patterns. The journey that had begun with locked doors and changed keys had opened unimaginable doorways to new possibilities. The disruption that had initially seemed catastrophic had instead catalyzed capacity development that might otherwise have remained dormant. The daughter who had faithfully paid someone else's mortgage had become a woman building equity in multiple dimensions: financial, professional, relational, and personal. As I unpacked my suitcase in the master bedroom I had renovated, with my own hands, I reflected on the distance traveled since that painful afternoon of exclusion. The renovation that had begun with physical space had extended to every aspect of my life, creating not just a transformed house, but a reconstructed understanding of worth, contribution, and possibility. The mortgage statement that arrived that week represented something far more significant than financial obligation. It documented investment in authentic foundation, one secure enough to support not just independent living, but expanding horizons, meaningful contribution, and relationships based on mutual respect rather than entrenched obligation. The monthly payment secured not just property, but possibility, not just shelter, but sovereignty. The foundation had proven stronger than anyone could have anticipated, including myself. The international recognition from the London conference created ripple effects through both my professional and personal spheres. Requests for consultation arrived from wealth management firms across Europe and Asia, seeking to implement our family financial boundaries methodology in culturally appropriate ways. Howard proposed establishing a dedicated international division with me as its director, a position that would include equity partnership in the firm. "This isn't just about expanded client services," he explained during a private dinner meeting at an elegant downtown restaurant. "It's about positioning our firm as thought leaders in an emerging specialization. The board recognizes your unique contribution to this vision." The opportunity represented significant professional advancement, higher compensation, ownership stake, and expanded influence. Yet it also carried implications for my carefully constructed balance between career and personal development. The international focus would require regular travel, Howard acknowledged, anticipating my consideration. "Quarterly trips to key markets at minimum. I understand that might impact your community initiatives and personal investments." He referred obliquely to Foundation Studios, which was now midway through renovating its second location. The expansion project demanded consistent oversight, with construction decisions and operational planning requiring regular attention. "I need time to consider all dimensions of this opportunity," I responded, neither accepting nor declining immediately. "The alignment with my professional goals is clear, but sustainability requires integration with my broader life architecture." Howard nodded appreciatively. "Take the time you need. This isn't an offer with an expiration date. We see your leadership in this area as integral to our long-term strategy." The conversation reflected how significantly my professional positioning had evolved. Rather than grateful acceptance of whatever opportunity might be extended, I now evaluated potential advancement through the lens of integrated life design, considering how professional growth would complement rather than compromise other dimensions of my development. This thoughtful evaluation process was interrupted by unexpected news that arrived the following week. A certified letter delivered to my office contained formal notification from an attorney I didn't recognize. Estate of Eleanor Winters. Dear Ms. Mitchell, this office represents the estate of Eleanor Winters, who passed away on May 12th. As executor of Ms. Winters' will, I am writing to inform you that you have been named as a beneficiary. Ms. Winters has bequeathed to you her residential property at 487 Lakeside Drive, along with its contents and associated land holdings of approximately 3 acres. Please contact this office at your earliest convenience to discuss transfer of title and other relevant details. The notification was bewildering. I had no immediate recollection of anyone named Eleanor Winters. Certainly no one with whom I shared a relationship significant enough to warrant such a substantial bequest. The Lakeside Drive address was in Cedar Brook, an upscale lakefront community about 40 minutes from the city, known for historic homes and natural beauty. I contacted the attorney immediately, attempting to resolve what seemed an obvious administrative error. "There's been some mistake," I explained when connected with Benjamin Ackerman, the signing attorney. "I don't know anyone named Eleanor Winters." "Ms. Winters anticipated your confusion," he replied, his tone suggesting this conversation was not unexpected. "She left a sealed letter to be delivered to you upon notification of the bequest. Perhaps it would be best if you came to the office to receive it and review the relevant documentation." Curiosity compelled me to schedule an appointment for the following day. The law office occupied a converted Victorian similar to my own, though dedicated entirely to professional use. Benjamin Ackerman, a distinguished attorney in his 60s, welcomed me into a wood-paneled conference room where several folders and a sealed envelope awaited. "Before I give you Ms. Winters's letter, let me confirm the basic facts," he began, opening the primary folder. Eleanor Winters, age 84, passed away peacefully after brief illness. She owned her Cedar Brook property outright, maintained substantial liquid assets which have been distributed according to her instructions, and had no surviving immediate family. The property bequeathed to you is valued at approximately $1.2 million, not including furnishings and personal effects. The valuation momentarily stunned me. Even with my substantial professional income and careful investments, this represented an asset of significant magnitude, one being inexplicably transferred to me by someone I couldn't recall knowing. "I still don't understand," I admitted. "Why would someone I don't remember leave me such a valuable property?" Mr. Ackerman slid the sealed envelope across the conference table. "I believe this will provide context. Ms. Winters was quite specific that you should read this privately before proceeding with any decisions regarding the property." The envelope bore my name in elegant handwriting. I opened it carefully, unfolding several pages of the same distinctive script. "Dear Rebecca, you won't remember me, but I remember you quite clearly. 6 years ago, you were the financial advisor assigned to my account when I was considering options for my retirement portfolio. During our consultation, you demonstrated exceptional integrity by recommending a more conservative approach than what would have generated higher commissions. For you personally, when I inquired about your reasoning, you explained that while more aggressive investments might benefit certain clients, my stated priorities, security and predictable income, would be better served through the strategy you proposed. You were the first financial professional who truly listened to my needs, rather than imposing standardized solutions. That singular interaction made such an impression that I requested you specifically for subsequent consultations. Unfortunately, when I called 2 years later, I was informed you had been assigned exclusively to higher net worth accounts due to your advancement within the firm. I've followed your career with interest through professional publications, most recently noting your international recognition for work on family financial boundaries. Your approach to wealth as a tool for creating healthy independence, rather than dependency, particularly resonated with my own philosophy. Having no children or close family to whom I might leave my home, I've chosen to bequeath it to someone whose professional integrity impressed me deeply during a brief but significant interaction. Someone who values both financial stewardship and the independence it can foster when handled thoughtfully. The Cedar Brook property has been my sanctuary for over 40 years. The gardens have been featured in regional publications, and the lakefront access provides remarkable tranquility. Whatever you choose to do with the property, live in it, sell it, repurpose it, I trust you will approach the decision with the same thoughtful integrity you demonstrated years ago. With appreciation for the difference principled professionals make. Eleanor Winters. I read the letter twice, memories gradually surfacing of the consultation she referenced. Eleanor Winters, a reserved, articulate widow who had inherited substantial assets from her husband but maintained modest lifestyle preferences. The interaction had indeed occurred as she described, though I would never have imagined it significant, enough to warrant such extraordinary recognition years later. I remember her now, I said quietly, looking up to find Mr. Ackerman watching me with patient interest. It was a routine consultation, one of dozens I conducted weekly at that stage of my career. I had no idea it held such significance for her. Ms. Winters was known for her discerning judgment, he replied. She valued substance over superficial charm, integrity over expedience. That she would recognize these qualities in you, even through limited interaction, speaks to both her discernment and your character. The validation from this unexpected source, a woman who had observed my professional conduct during a period when my personal life was defined by unrecognized sacrifice, felt profoundly affirming. Eleanor Winters had valued what my own family had taken for granted, principled service that prioritized others' well-being over personal advantage. There's more, Mr. Ackerman continued. Ms. Winters stipulated that you should have opportunity to visit the property before making any decisions regarding its disposition. She believed experiencing the space might inform your choices in ways documentation alone cannot. Would you be interested in viewing the property today? I'm authorized to provide immediate access. The invitation to see this unexpected inheritance firsthand was impossible to decline. Mr. Ackerman provided the address and gate code, explaining that the housekeeper maintained weekly visits to ensure the property's condition remained impeccable during the transition. Driving to Cedarbrook that afternoon, I struggled to process this extraordinary development. The property represented not just unexpected financial windfall, but affirmation from an unexpected source. Recognition of professional integrity during a period when my personal boundaries were still undeveloped. The address led to a private drive winding through mature trees before revealing a stunning craftsman-style home nestled among professional landscaping. Built of natural stone and timber, the house featured expansive windows oriented toward the lake, visible beyond an immaculate garden. A wraparound porch with comfortable seating areas invited outdoor living, while strategic plantings created privacy from neighboring properties. Using the provided key, I entered a home that immediately conveyed both elegance and comfort. Unlike ostentatious properties designed primarily to impress, Eleanor's home reflected thoughtful intention, spaces created for actual living rather than mere display. Built-in bookshelves housed an extensive library. Window seats offered perfect reading. Nooks with lake views. The kitchen combined professional-grade appliances with inviting gathering space. Moving through the rooms, I discovered a sunlit office containing organized files, a garden journal documenting decades of horticultural development, and a collection of regional architectural books. The master suite offered panoramic lake views, while 3 additional bedrooms had been repurposed as a dedicated art studio, music room, and meditation space. The rear of the property featured tiered gardens leading to a private dock, where a small covered sitting area extended over the water. I settled into one of the Adirondack chairs, watching sunlight play across the lake's surface while attempting to process this unexpected inheritance. Eleanor Winters had created something remarkable, a property that manifested her values through thoughtful design and purposeful stewardship. Her bequest represented not just financial value, but a physical manifestation of principled independence, meaningful contribution, and deliberate life architecture, the very values I had been cultivating in my own evolution. The question of what to do with this extraordinary gift required careful consideration. My Victorian duplex represented significant personal investment, not just financial, but emotional and creative energy devoted to its transformation. Foundation Studios' expansion created continuing ties to the urban community we served. Yet this lakeside property offered possibilities I hadn't previously considered: connection with nature, dedicated space for creative development, potential retreat facility for programs aligned with financial independence. Rather than rushing toward decision, I spent several hours exploring the property thoroughly, examining the gardens Eleanor had documented in her journals, investigating the environmental systems she had implemented for sustainability, appreciating the art collection that reflected her aesthetic sensibilities. The space revealed a woman who had constructed her life with deliberate intention, creating physical surroundings that supported her values and priorities. Returning to the city that evening, I recognized that this unexpected inheritance required integration into my evolving life architecture. The property represented not just asset, but opportunity, potential expansion into dimensions previously unexplored or underdeveloped. The following morning brought another unexpected development. Victoria called, her voice carrying unusual urgency. "Rebecca, I need advice but not financial rescue," she began, the distinction immediately capturing my attention. "Jason has received a job offer that would significantly advance his career and provide much better compensation. But it's in Denver. We're trying to evaluate whether relocation makes sense given all factors." The situation represented exactly the type of complex life decision Victoria would previously have abdicated to parental direction or defaulted to immediate gratification, without strategic evaluation. Her approach now, seeking input without surrendering decision-making responsibility, demonstrated continuing maturation. "What factors are you considering?" I asked, intentionally avoiding immediate advice-giving. "Professional opportunity, balanced against family separation," she replied thoughtfully. "Financial advantages versus relocation costs. Children's adjustment to new environments versus potential quality-of-life improvements. We've actually created a decision matrix, but the emotional elements are harder to quantify." Her methodical approach impressed me, evidence of developed capacity for complex evaluation rather than reactive choice. The sister who had once expected bailouts was now methodically analyzing major life decisions with appropriate diligence. "Those are exactly the right considerations," I acknowledged. "What specifically would be helpful from me?" "Perspective on whether we're overlooking anything critical," Victoria explained. "You're skilled at identifying blind spots in decision frameworks. And," she added with newfound self-awareness, "emotional reassurance that prioritizing our family's advancement isn't wrong even if it disappoints Mom and Dad." The request reflected precisely the type of bounded support that strengthened rather than undermined developing independence. Victoria wasn't seeking rescue, but targeted insight that respected her decision-making authority. "I can absolutely provide that perspective," I assured her. "Would tomorrow evening work? I'd like to give this the thoughtful attention it deserves rather than rushing guidance." Our conversation reinforced how fundamentally our relationship had evolved since the lock-changing incident. The sister who had once participated in my exclusion was now seeking appropriate support for independent decision-making, neither expecting rescue nor avoiding responsibility. The family dynamics that had once revolved around imbalanced expectations and unrecognized contribution were gradually recalibrating toward mutually respectful adult relationships. This evolution paralleled my own continuing growth, from defining worth primarily through family service to constructing multidimensional identity anchored in authentic values. The unexpected inheritance from Eleanor Winters arrived within this context of expansion, offering not just property, but affirmation of the principles guiding my reconstruction. As I prepared for sleep that night, surrounded by the Victorian home I had transformed through deliberate intention, I reflected on these converging developments: international professional recognition, potential equity partnership, unexpected property inheritance, and evolving family dynamics. Each represented different dimensions of the life architecture I was constructing, one increasingly defined by conscious choice rather than reactive obligation. The mortgage statement for my Victorian duplex lay on my desk beside Eleanor's handwritten letter, physical manifestations of different chapters in my continuing evolution. The first documented my initial step toward independence, property secured through my own resources after years of unrecognized contribution to someone else's asset. The second represented unexpected acknowledgement from a virtual stranger who had valued what my own family had overlooked, principled service that maintained integrity even when recognition wasn't anticipated. Together, they illustrated the unpredictable nature of life reconstruction, how decisive boundary setting could catalyze expansion beyond initial imagining, how principled choices made without expectation of reward might yield unexpected recognition. Years later, how painful exclusion could ultimately create capacity for inclusion on more authentic terms. The daughter who had been locked out of the family home she subsidized had become a woman with expanding professional influence, community impact, and now, unexpected property holdings that represented both financial security and affirmation of the values guiding her evolution. The mortgage that had once represented sacrifice now documented investment in sustainable independence, a foundation strong enough to support expanding horizons beyond initial conception. Eleanor Winters's unexpected bequest offered material evidence of a fundamental truth. Integrity eventually finds recognition, though rarely from expected sources or through anticipated timing. The professional principle that had guided my advice, years earlier, prioritizing client well-being over personal advantage, had created ripples beyond my awareness, eventually returning as tangible affirmation during a phase of significant expansion. The inheritance represented not just property but possibility, potential integration of urban professional engagement with natural restoration, community leadership with personal renewal, structured achievement with creative exploration. The woman who had once defined herself primarily through family obligation was now navigating abundance across multiple dimensions, constructing life architecture that reflected authentic priorities rather than external expectations. As I drifted toward sleep, words from Eleanor's letter resonated with particular significance. Whatever you choose to do with the property, live in it, sell it, repurpose it, I trust you will approach the decision with the same thoughtful integrity you demonstrated years ago. The inheritance, like every other aspect of my reconstructed life, would be shaped by deliberate intention rather than default patterns. The foundation established through necessary boundaries now supported expanded possibilities beyond initial conception, professional leadership, community development, evolving family relationships, and now, unexpected abundance from recognized integrity. The renovation continued, not just of physical space, but of expanded potential across every dimension of authentic becoming. The lakeside property in Cedar Brook presented a fascinating challenge: how to integrate this unexpected gift into my carefully constructed life without disrupting the balance I had worked so diligently to establish. This wasn't merely a question of asset management, but of intentional life architecture, determining how this property could enhance rather than complicate my evolving priorities. After several visits to thoroughly explore the Cedar Brook house and grounds, I recognized that Eleanor Winters hadn't just created a beautiful home, but a thoughtfully designed ecosystem. The gardens featured native plantings requiring minimal maintenance while supporting local wildlife. The house incorporated passive solar design elements that minimized energy consumption. The small orchard provided seasonal fruit. Every aspect reflected deliberate choices balancing aesthetic beauty with practical sustainability. These discoveries prompted deeper reflection about property ownership and purpose. My Victorian duplex served multiple functions: personal residence, foundation, studio's original location, and rental income. Eleanor's property offered entirely different possibilities: connection with nature, creative retreat space, potential gathering place for workshops or programs aligned with my evolving professional focus. Rather than making immediate decisions, I developed a thorough evaluation process. First, I created a comprehensive inventory of both properties, assessing not just financial considerations, but how each space supported or could potentially support different aspects of my life and work. Second, I studied Eleanor's extensive documentation: garden journals, sustainability modifications, community engagement, seeking insights into her intention for the property. Finally, I established a 3-month discernment period during which I would spend alternating weekends at the lakeside property, experiencing it through changing seasons and circumstances. This methodical approach reflected my evolution from reactive decision-making to strategic life design. The younger Rebecca might have rushed toward selling one property to eliminate complexity, or kept both out of sentimental attachment without considering sustainability. The woman I had become recognized that thoughtful integration required both analytical assessment and experiential understanding. During this discernment period, multiple dimensions of my life continued evolving. Victoria and Jason decided to accept the Denver opportunity after careful evaluation of all factors. Their decision-making process demonstrated remarkable maturity. They had created a comprehensive analysis of financial implications, researched neighborhoods with strong schools for their children, developed a transition timeline that minimized disruption, and established a communication plan for maintaining family connections despite geographic distance. "We found a 3-bedroom townhouse within our budget," Victoria shared during one of our regular coffee meetings. "The Homeowners Association covers exterior maintenance, which addresses one of our concerns about property management while we're still developing those skills." What impressed me most wasn't the specific decision, but the thoughtful process behind it. The sister who had once expected immediate gratification and external rescue had become capable of strategic planning and independent evaluation. She had developed the very capabilities our parents' enabling patterns had previously stunted. "We've also established monthly video calls with Mom and Dad as part of our transition plan," she continued. "We want the children to maintain strong grandparent connections even with physical distance." Her approach reflected nuanced understanding of family dynamics, maintaining meaningful relationships while establishing appropriate independence. The boundary work we had both been practicing in different ways was yielding healthier family patterns without requiring complete disconnection. My parents' response to Victoria's planned relocation revealed their own continuing evolution. My father had helped research Denver neighborhoods and employment opportunities for Jason, focusing practical support on their independence rather than attempting to prevent their departure. My mother had initially expressed emotional resistance, but ultimately shifted toward helping plan meaningful pre-relocation family activities and establishing video call routines. These changing family patterns created space for me to reconsider my own relationship with my parents. While the betrayal of the lock-changing incident couldn't be erased, their demonstrated capacity for growth suggested potential for rebuilding connection on more appropriate terms. Not the unquestioning trust of before, certainly, but perhaps cautious engagement based on current behaviors rather than past wounds. I initiated this recalibration through a carefully considered invitation. The Foundation Studio's expansion was nearing completion, with grand opening scheduled for early autumn. The event would include an exhibition featuring member entrepreneurs, tours of the renovated space, and recognition of community partners who had supported our growth. "I'd like to invite you to the Foundation Studios opening," I said during a brief Sunday phone call with my parents. "The project represents significant community investment, and I think you might find the business model interesting." The invitation acknowledged their capacity for appropriate interest in my professional accomplishments, a dimension of relationship that had been notably absent during years of focusing primarily on Victoria's needs. Their immediate acceptance, expressed with genuine enthusiasm rather than obligation, suggested readiness for this recalibrated connection. "We've been following news about Foundation Studios online," my father revealed unexpectedly. "The business model you've developed is quite innovative. I've actually mentioned it to several colleagues looking at mixed-use development opportunities." His comment represented significant shift, attention to my accomplishments independent of family obligation, recognition of my professional expertise, even pride in my innovative approach. While reconciliation remained complex terrain, this exchange suggested potential for relationship based on mutual respect rather than entrenched patterns. As my family relationships evolved through careful boundary management, my professional expansion continued accelerating. The international division Howard had proposed was moving from concept to implementation, with partnership documents now ready for review. The opportunity represented significant advancement, expanded influence, increased compensation, equity stake in the firm I had helped shape. "The committee unanimously approved your appointment as Managing Director, International Family Wealth Services," Howard announced during our formal review meeting. "The position comes with full equity partnership effective immediately, rather than the typical 3-year vesting period." The accelerated equity offer reflected my established contribution and the firm's recognition of my market value, awareness that my thought leadership represented significant competitive advantage. This validation contrasted sharply with my family's historical undervaluation of my capabilities and contribution. "I'm prepared to accept with 2 modifications," I responded, having thoroughly reviewed the proposal. "First, I'd like to establish a flexible travel schedule that accommodates quarterly rather than monthly international engagements, allowing balanced attention to domestic initiatives. Second, I'd like to incorporate remote work options that would permit occasional weeks at my Cedarbrook property, where I'm establishing a fully equipped home office." My counterproposal reflected the integrated life architecture I was deliberately constructing, professional advancement harmonized, with personal well-being, global engagement balanced with local community investment, urban energy complemented by natural restoration. The woman who had once accepted whatever conditions accompanied recognition now confidently negotiated terms aligned with holistic priorities. Howard's immediate acceptance confirmed my professional leverage. "Those modifications are entirely reasonable. We value your leadership enough to accommodate balanced implementation. The equity partnership documents will be revised accordingly." With my professional advancement secured on appropriate terms, Foundation Studios expansion nearing completion and family relationships cautiously rebalancing, I focused renewed attention on Eleanor Winter's property. The 3-month discernment period had yielded valuable insights through varied experiences: solo weekends of reflection and creativity, small gatherings with Foundation Studios members exploring retreat possibilities, quiet days documenting the extensive gardens she had created. Through this immersion, a vision gradually crystallized, not an either-or decision between properties, but strategic integration of complementary spaces serving different dimensions of my expanding life. The Victorian duplex would remain my primary residence and Foundation Studios anchor, maintaining urban connection and professional accessibility. The Cedarbrook property would serve multiple purposes: personal retreat for creative restoration, small group gathering space for workshops aligned with financial empowerment, and potential revenue generation through selective corporate retreats focused on ethical leadership. This integrated approach would require operational systems beyond individual management. I developed a comprehensive implementation plan, hiring a property manager with specialized experience in both residential and retreat properties, establishing a booking system for controlled access to the Cedarbrook space, creating maintenance protocols that honored Eleanor's sustainability priorities, and developing program partnerships with organizations aligned with financial empowerment and women's leadership development. The solution honored both properties' distinct qualities while creating sustainable management systems. Rather than choosing between urban engagement and natural connection, professional advancement and personal restoration, community contribution and private renewal, the integrated approach embraced complementary dimensions essential for whole-person flourishing. This strategy reflected profound evolution in my approach to resource management. From scarcity mentality that necessitated either-or thinking to abundance perspective that recognized potential for complementary integration. The woman who had once adapted to limited basement housing now confidently orchestrated multiple properties serving distinct purposes within cohesive life architecture. The Foundation Studio's opening ceremony in early autumn provided perfect opportunity to witness these various dimensions of my reconstructed life converging harmoniously. The expanded space welcomed nearly 200 guests, member entrepreneurs showcasing their businesses, community partners celebrating collaborative development, professional colleagues witnessing innovative leadership, and family members experiencing previously unacknowledged dimensions of my capability. My parents' attendance carried particular significance. Their presence represented cautious relationship rebuilding based on current reality rather than historical patterns. Throughout the evening, they engaged with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about the business model, conversing respectfully with member entrepreneurs, expressing authentic appreciation for the community-oriented approach. "This is remarkable," my father commented, as we toured the photography studio designed specifically for product photography that supported multiple members' businesses. "You've created something that generates both economic opportunity and genuine community. That's exceptionally rare in business development." His observation reflected respect for my professional discernment, recognition of capabilities previously overlooked during years of focusing primarily on family obligation. While reconciliation remained ongoing process rather than completed destination, this interaction demonstrated potential for relationship recalibration that acknowledged my full personhood rather than merely functional utility. The evening concluded with a brief presentation highlighting Foundation Studio's evolution from converted rental unit to expanding enterprise supporting women's financial independence. I intentionally emphasized the origin story, how unexpected displacement had catalyzed creative reimagining of purpose and possibility. "Sometimes our greatest innovations emerge from disruption rather than stability," I noted, making eye contact with my parents across the room. "When familiar patterns are interrupted, we discover capacities previously undefined by external expectations or limited circumstances." The statement acknowledged transformation without directly referencing family betrayal, offering perspective that invited reflection without demanding explicit acknowledgement. The subtle reference created space for understanding without requiring immediate resolution of complex history. Later that evening, as the final guests departed and Foundation Studios members celebrated our successful launch, I reflected on the extraordinary journey from basement apartment to expanding enterprise, from family obligation to community creation, from unrecognized contribution to celebrated leadership. The path had been neither linear nor predictable, yet each challenge had ultimately expanded rather than diminished capacity for authentic impact. The mortgage statements that now arrived for both properties, Victorian Duplex and Cedarbrook, Lakeside, represented more than financial obligation. They documented deliberate investment in spaces that supported different but complementary dimensions of integrated life: professional engagement and personal restoration, urban connection, and natural immersion, community contribution and private reflection. The regular payments secured not just property but possibility, physical foundations for expanding horizons across multiple dimensions of authentic becoming. As autumn leaves transformed the Cedarbrook landscape into brilliant color, I spent a reflective weekend at the lakeside property, walking the grounds Eleanor had so lovingly tended while finalizing implementation plans for its expanded purpose. The garden journal she had meticulously maintained provided insight into her approach to stewardship, honoring established foundations while continuously enhancing potential through thoughtful cultivation. One entry particularly resonated with my current circumstances. The garden teaches that abundance requires both boundary and expansion. Root systems must be appropriately contained while receiving adequate space for healthy growth. Too much constraint creates stunted development. Insufficient structure allows chaotic spreading without sustainable depth. The art of gardening, like the art of living, requires discerning this essential balance. Her wisdom captured precisely the journey I had navigated since that pivotal afternoon when locked doors catalyzed necessary independence. The boundaries established through that painful experience had created foundation for expansion beyond. Initial imagination, professional advancement, community creation, property development, and cautiously reconstructed family relationships, all reflecting more authentic expression than previously possible within constrained circumstances. The mortgage that had once represented sacrifice now funded strategic integration across multiple dimensions of purposeful living. The property that had once represented exclusion had catalyzed expansive inclusion on more appropriate terms. The betrayal that had initially seemed devastating had ultimately generated capacity development that might otherwise have remained dormant. Eleanor Winter's unexpected bequest had arrived precisely when I had developed capacity for its thoughtful integration. Neither earlier, when scarcity mentality might have prompted hasty decisions, nor later when established patterns might have resisted creative reimagining. The timing itself represented affirmation that authentic growth follows necessary sequences: foundation before expansion, boundary before integration, self-connection before strategic contribution. Up next, you've got two more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.